Hey, folks. David Stewart here. I am back with author Brian Niemeier. He has a new book. You can see it on your screen. You can find the link in the chat. Sorry, we're starting a little bit late. Sometimes you have some technical difficulties. The technology goblins start getting into things. Magic doesn't want to participate, but we're here. I'm back with Brian Niemeier. And today we're going to be talking about college debt because he has a new book that is launching right now on Kickstarter. It is called Debt Reckoning. And why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about this book?
Yeah, thanks, David. I don't know about you. Actually, I do know about you. But, we're going to get into that
We've
later.
had this conversation so many times, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's because there's just a mountain of out of touch, outdated, and often well-meaning, but sometimes even outright malicious lies and misinformation spread about the student loan industry, how the whole system works, what the ROI of a degree is, and who benefits. So we've both been looking into this issue for the better part of a decade now. And one of my readers finally asked me, well, why don't you do something about it in the way that only you can and write a book about it? So here it is. This is the book about the student loan crisis for millennials, but also boomers, parents and grandparents of recent high school and college grads who want help navigating this economic minefield.
Yeah, so this is I recall a very specific memory of a stream you and I had a couple of years ago where we stumbled onto this topic and we were talking about usury. And we were talking about student debt, and I'm like, I looked into this and I was thinking about it, and I'm pretty sure student loans are usury. And we went and looked at it. It's like, and you said there's no way they can't not be usury. And the reason is because of the way usury is defined. And whenever I talk about usury, this is always one of the first barriers that people get into, is that they just don't know what usury means. They don't know what the sin of usury is, and they don't know its historical usage, like what the word means historically. Maybe that's a good place to start, because I remember that specific conversation and it really set me off on a philosophical and theological, I don't know if I want to call it a rabbit hole or a quest, but I went down and I ended up reading a lot of St. Thomas Aquinas on this specific issue. And it's one of those things where, like, my mind really got changed on a topic through information. That doesn't always happen, but this is one of those cases where it really did.
Yeah, and I watched your intellectual evolution on the subject, and it was really inspiring, frankly. So you were one of the folks who inspired me to write this book. So yeah, that's a great departure point. And yes, the angelic doctor, St. Thomas Aquinas, is the perfect place to start to clear up the confusion about what usury is. And you homed right in on the keyword, which is use, right? So usury is the charging of interest, not just on the money lent to purchase a good, but on the use of it as well. And because while, yes, the money belongs rightly to the lender, the use of the goods purchased with the money is located in the end user, in the borrower. Therefore, usury is a form of slavery.
Yes.
Because it makes direct claims on the person of the borrower, not his goods or assets.
Yeah. And so going back to Aquinas, one of the things he said is, like, one of the reasons that the use of money is immoral is that there's actually no such thing as the use of money. So, and I should also mention this, one of the things I love about reading Aquinas is that Aquinas approaches any moral topic or theological topic like he needs to convince every person in the room, because he probably has had to convince every person in the room. So you find a wealth of counter arguments for everything. And he actually starts with the Bible. So the Bible says not to do this. So if you're one of those people that just is just going to go to the Bible, there it is. But if you want to go deeper, here's other arguments. There's no such thing as the use of money. You don't use money except maybe to, like, roll it up and snort cocaine with it. Money is sin. So I think the analogy he uses is wine, right? If I give you wine to drink and you drink the wine, I can't get the wine back from you. That wine's gone. You drank it, your body transformed it into things that it used and things that it got rid of. The wine's gone, it's consumed by its use. So that's the same thing with money. You can't get back the money that I lend you. You give me different money, and that's where the word mutuum comes from. It's a like for like trade. And because there's no use for money, you actually can't charge for the use of money. You're charging for something that doesn't exist. You can use a weed whacker, you can use a wheelbarrow, you can use a house, you can use a car. You can't use money.
Right. Which makes it a form of theft too. Good point.
Yeah, it would be, charging someone for something that doesn't exist would be selling them something that doesn't work intentionally, or something. I'm going to sell you a patch of land in an alternate dimension. No, we would consider that a dishonest transaction because that thing doesn't actually exist.
Right.
And he has a couple other moral arguments for it, but I always start there. I was like, okay. Then we get to think about, well, what kinds of debt are usury? And I remember having this conversation with you where we landed on college debt is usury because a degree is not a thing. I can't trade my degree for something. If I run out of money and I'm like, okay, well, I'll give you back my degree. Can't do that. Maybe you should, but you can't under current things.
Yeah, and that's the difference between a non-recourse and a full recourse loan. So I want the audience to understand, we're not saying, and the Bible and Aquinas are not saying that any lending at interest is usurious or inherently immoral. That's an important distinction. It's what everybody jumps to. The two errors are they think that either usury is determined by the amount of interest charged or being charged at all. And no, that's not it at all. Aquinas, who, as you alluded to, his job was professor of sacred scripture at the University of Paris. Okay, so he would get up like with his masters and his students and do disputes on these matters. So that was his training ground for these kinds of disputations. And so he learned to embrace both right, and subtleties. So it's just what you said. Usury is the charging of an interest on a consumption loan, a mutual loan. An example of one that is not usurious would be a mortgage, because the bank can repossess the house and then you're square and everybody's books are even and you're done.
Yeah, and so it's like, well, why is a mortgage interest not usury? Well, because you're using the house.
Yeah.
So what you're actually paying for is you're paying the debt, and you're also renting the house. If you could think of it like this way, although we use different language to qualify it, but you're using a house. So the difference between what the bank paid for the house and what you end up paying over time is the use of the house, because you're using the house. The bank is not using the house. And so that's where the interest comes from. And it would actually be the same with an auto loan. You're driving a car, you're using the car, the car lot is not using the car. So they don't really, their interest is their ability to not have the car and for you to have the car.
Yeah. Anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah. And any loan that is for something that has a tangible use, and more importantly, or just as importantly, repossessing the item would satisfy the debt in full, is not usury.
Yeah.
And you can see how student loans do not fall into that category, because like you said, they can't go after your degree. The banks, formerly now the feds, can only go after you. And boy, do they. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't get rid of it with bankruptcy, right? So there's no way to structure your way out of college loan debt. They don't, I shouldn't say they automatic. I've heard of people getting them adjusted in bankruptcy, but they don't automatically go away with bankruptcy, not like credit card debt and things like that.
Well, that's in the book. We can, because I'm here to help people navigate this incredibly Byzantine and arcane system. We can talk about exactly how hard that is. So first of all, you used to be able to discharge student loans in bankruptcy until the 70s, I believe. And then an act of Congress specifically made it way harder. So initially, Congress said, okay, well, to discharge your student loans in bankruptcy, you have to prove financial hardship. And that's a specific legal term. Now, I'm not giving legal advice, I'm not a lawyer, but to just give you the Cliff's Notes version, that basically means you have to prove you don't have any money now. That's a financial hardship in a nutshell. Well, then they changed it again more recently to require a significant financial hardship. And that word does a lot of heavy lifting because it basically now means you have to prove you not only have no money now, you will never have money.
Yeah.
Only, there's a
They'd be like permanently disabled.
Yeah, there's a legal test. Yes, you do. And there's one tragic case about a boomer couple actually who took out like a $60,000 student loan back in the 2000s and had paid off $38,000 of it and still owed $63,000 after that because of the usurious interest.
Mm-hmm.
And then the husband like came down with a debilitating disease or got hurt at work, but he lost his job and could never work. And they successfully sued for bankruptcy for their other debts, but they had to go to like multiple court levels in the federal courts to finally have a judge say, okay, yes, you are broke, you will always be broke, and did discharge the student debt. But that's how extreme it is. And like a 0.5% of all student debtors who sue to discharge student loans succeed. That's how long the odds are.
Yeah, that's pretty tough.
So it's effectively, you can't get rid of it in bankruptcy. Yep. We'll play the Powerball.
So let's do a little Socratic talking here, because I know I have seen all of the objections to everything that we're going to talk about. And anytime I mention it, it's like I know what's going to pop up. And I'm reminded of St. Thomas because he would put all those objections in his writings, because those are the objections that people would come up with. And so he would always, if it was a real objection, it deserves an answer. So one of them is basically you can't have student loans be discharged through bankruptcy, because then the people who issue student loans are going to get hosed, right? Is that there's too much risk. No one would put out a student loan because there's too much risk in putting one out if the student loan can just be discharged. And my response to that, I'll give you my response. My response is, okay, well then there should be fewer student loans.
Right?
Yeah, yes, they shouldn't be doing the student loans. And we can also talk about, maybe as we go on, we could talk about some of the downstream effects of student loans, because I've seen those as well. But that's a big one, right? It's like, if they wouldn't give out student loans, if the debt could just be wiped away, it's like, yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and get this. I mean, whenever conservatives especially would say this, whenever a private enterprise makes a business plan, like let's say to start a car wash, okay, and they figure out that, like, they project, okay, we will need like X amount of funding of credit to get off the ground, but we also project that our profits after, like, let's say 3 decades will more than make up for it. So we have a sound, viable business plan, and the market changes and things don't work out the way we expect it to, largely because of other federal regulations. What do we tell those people? Well, sorry, better luck next time, but we're not going to shed any tears over it. That's the risk you take. The federal government took that kind of risk, and that is why federal student loans exist in the first place.
Yeah.
There were 2 acts, both called the Higher Education Act, one under Johnson and then one later, I think, under Clinton. And they were, like, the first one was sold as, well, we need to compete with the Soviets in the Cold War and the space race, so there should be federal aid for basically STEM degrees to help with our space program and defense, right? Then, through scope creep, the rhetoric from the government expanded to, well, and we want to elevate the educational standard of all of America. And that's where you kind of started getting this idea of, well, everyone should go to college. It should be a right.
Yeah.
Well, then that morphed into, well, and because it was the second act, I believe, along with acts by the Obama administration that got rid of the private lending in student loans, and it's like 99% issued by the Department of Education now, like they are the lender. And
Yeah, there's whole university departments dedicated to proctoring student loans. It's been, because I worked in the university system. I taught at at the university level. I would see this a lot at, a big significant portion of the administration building. We had a whole giant building that was administration. I think it was the biggest building on campus. And it, there was a huge office that was just dedicated to financial aid. And when you went in there, the financial aid wasn't scholarships. That was like a tiny portion. I had to go in there to get like scholarship money fixed a bunch of times, but it was proctoring student loans. It was getting people to fill out student loan applications.
Right. And that circles right back to what we're talking about, because it turns out that the more federal aid in the form of loans and subsidies get pumped into universities, the more they decrease institutional aid.
Can you let's repeat that again? The more student aid?
Yeah, basically, for every dollar of federal subsidies that a university gets, they cut their own aid by like 30, 40 cents.
So yeah, they're giving out less. They're giving out fewer scholarship dollars and taking in more federal student loan dollars.
Bingo. Yeah, federal student loan dollars crowd out state and private student resources.
Yeah, there's an old economics razor for this, which is cheap money drives out dear money.
Bingo. That's what's happening. And it was by design, because this program was sold to Congress and the American people as, well, if the United States government, aka the taxpayers, becomes the primary lender of student loans, then we stand to turn billions in profit. They sold it as a money-making venture off of students. But now the value proposition is upside down. Like they'd expected to make something like $200 billion in profit off of the campaign, off of the Higher Education Act, and the federal government becoming the main lender of student loans. And instead, they are now heading toward losing twice as much.
Wow.
From default.
Wow. So yeah, this is like a time bomb that's going off no matter what. That's this is an argument from, this is what we call, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's an argument for the practical bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Practically, this is a problem that actually has to be solved. Regardless of whether you think that it's bad or good that you forgive student loan debt, or you have some sort of reasoning there, is like, this is a problem that will blow up no matter what you do.
Yeah, it's totally a time bomb. Some have compared it to like the 2008 crash. I've looked into what the likely repercussions will be, because to paint you in the audience a picture of what's happening right now, like, okay, United States borrowers currently hold a combined $2 trillion in student loan debt, okay? Even before COVID, 40% of those were headed toward a default. And it has not gotten better.
Yeah. Things have not improved since then.
And because the federal government is now just the lender for student loans, that means the taxpayers are going to be on the hook for, like, at minimum $1 trillion no matter what. Like, that's if we do nothing. If we do nothing and just let the situation play out,
mm-hmm.
There is no longer a situation in which do nothing doesn't hose taxpayers. Or at least the Department of Education, like, they're on the hook for $1 trillion.
So you have to decide, if you think it's evil, great. We're now at the pick the lesser of two evils. We got the trolley problem. We got another one of those damn trolley problems.
Well, and what if I told you that in Debt Reckoning, I present a number of solutions that could head that off without hosing taxpayers? Like, there is a way out.
So we're going to have to get the book and find out.
Well, yeah, I mean, Like, we're both publishers. I can't just give away the cow, but I can
Yeah,
give you some milk here.
absolutely.
Note that what was the main problem we've been talking about? It's the interest.
Yes. And that's really, if we're talking about usury is the interest, not the principal,
Right.
right? But charging interest is the actual usury part. But a lot of people who are paying their loans, if there was no interest, they would have paid off the principal already.
Right.
And that's the way interest works, is that it accrues. And I occasionally see people because and I'm not trying to do this as a judgment against people who point this out, but I'll see it on the internet and they're like, how is it that my $60,000 loan, I've paid $60,000 of, and I still owe $100,000 on it or something like that? And it's like, this is the magic of compound interest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these people are economically illiterate. Well, that's not entirely their fault. And when I think of student loan debt, especially, it's like an 18-year-old comes in, I have to go to college. I'm in. How do I pay for it? Fill out this loan application. They haven't really been given all the information to make what I would consider a fully consenting decision.
Mm.
Even then, I think there's moral problems with having consent be the razor for morality. And very few people really talk about some of those problems. Like, you can't sell yourself into slavery, and usury debt is a form of slavery. It's a debt on your person.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. So, private watchdog groups and like state level investigators have looked into the student loan federal collections system, and they found that huge numbers of student borrowers were just outright lied to. Like, the terms are misrepresented or intentionally explained vaguely or miscommunicated. So we can't broom the fact that there's a industrial scale fraud going on that the system is perpetrating. Some of them just were scammed. Like, millions of them were scammed.
Yeah. Now, I view universities as a big participant in this. I mentioned, the big student financial aid office, which was really about proctoring loans. If you haven't been in the university system, and I know most of my viewers haven't, they weren't college professors or anything, and it's been a long time since I was in it, and I think it's gotten worse. The way that student loans have affected the structure of higher education is opaque to most people because they're not inside it. But the result is there's no extra teachers. But the cost has gone up and up and up. So where's that extra money going? It's actually going to what we call administration. And administration is not the dean of the College of Arts and Humanities. And that's not what they mean by administration. It's all the extra people that are around that. So it's the people who work in the student financial aid office who proctor loans. They all get paid a salary, sometimes a very generous salary. There's the managers who run that. There's all the people who work in the cleric's office. There's there's all the people who work in the president's office. There's the dean. Then you add an assistant dean, which wasn't always there. Each of them both have 2 secretaries. So there's 4 extra people that's there. Then you have a chair of a department. So if there's a dean of math and science, then you're also going to have an assistant dean. Then you'll have a chair of the math department. Might have a vice chair. Each of them will have a secretary, and that secretary is earning $60,000, $70,000 a year. So before you know it, you've quadrupled or quintupled, or last time I checked it was like a 10 or 12x increase in the number of staff that weren't teachers. Now, at the university I taught at, which was California State University, Fresno, part of the CSU system, a very large California State University, they also had a program to pay off the college professors to retire early because it was a money-saving device. So they would pay tenured faculty to retire, and they would replace them with adjunct. That was me. So they'd replace them with people like me who basically worked for an hourly, rather than a salary, worked for an hourly wage. That was cheaper. So you could hire 2 adjunct and pay them maybe a total of $40,000 a year. And then you retired your tenured faculty that made $120,000 a year. So the number of teachers would increase by 2, but the total number of courses offered hasn't increased at all. Even as they increase the roles. Why do they keep letting more people come into the university system? Why? Well, because they're all willing to pay the money because of the infinite money that comes from student debt. It's a bit like inflation, but only for this one area.
Oh,
Tons of free cash, but only for higher education, and it drives everything up.
yeah, especially tuition. Great point. Yeah, studies have shown, including by former Education Secretary William Bennett, like Reagan's Education Secretary. Okay, so we're not talking some pink-haired lefty. He showed that somewhat counterintuitively, the more student loan money that you give universities, the higher tuition gets.
Yep, absolutely. I've witnessed it. The more student loans are taken out, it's just like inflation. It's an economic thing, right? A fistful of dollars means prices go up. You don't have to be a genius to understand, where supply and demand meet. The supply is kind of fixed, but they increase enrollment to increase the supply, but they don't increase the number of hours available for students to take. So classes are always overcrowded. I remember I had classes that, the max enrollment was like 35. I'd have 60 people show up trying to get into that class because there was no other offerings for it. They needed to have like 2 or 3 extra sections of that class, but they wouldn't do that because they'd have to pay more money. That money needed to go to the dean's secretary. That money needed to go to the president who made $700,000 a year or whatever it was. I remember Janet Napolitano got hired as the director of UC of the University of California system, which was the second biggest university system in California. There's the California State University and University of California. They have all these campuses. So she was the head of the entire University of California, and her salary back then was like $750,000 a year. Meanwhile, her background is not even education. She just worked for like Clinton and Obama.
Yeah, and you bring up a nice segue into a kerfuffle that is currently burning up Twitter, which is the millennials being told just to eat hardtack and rice and stop having $28 burritos and they can buy a house immediately, right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of strawmanning it, but not by much. And you have other folks saying, oh, okay, well, people forget that back in the day, fast food used to be comparably affordable next to cooking it at home. Like, they'll post like a McDonald's dollar menu or $5 footlong from Subway or a Taco Bell, like $5 burrito ad. And then the response is always like, oh yeah, well, during Corona Chan though, fast food restaurants jacked up prices and people kept paying them. So that taught them that they could keep prices high, that they were inelastic. Well, student loans have taught universities the same thing, and that's why tuition is skyrocketing beyond any kind of CPI.
Yeah. Yeah, and so here's the thing too, is like, it's not a case of you spend more and you get more. And I also have and I don't have data to back this up, but I also believe, as you said, like they reduce the amount of, say, scholarship money that they give out. Mm-hmm. I also think that like the CSU and the UC systems, as well as like the University of Texas system here, all of these state universities, they're funded by taxpayers. So part of the entire, I don't know what to call it, like the package presented to taxpayers is these are state universities. They're partially funded by the taxpayers because people will get educations from them, maybe at a reduced cost because we're subsidizing it by directly funding the university. And that will help our economics because more people will have degrees, we'll have more knowledge out there, right? It'll be good for everyone. I think there's also been, because certainly as the proportion of money generated by student loan goes up, there hasn't been a comparable increase in taxpayers funding the university. It's all growth from student loan debt. It's not like the taxpayers are paying extra money to keep the UC system open. All that extra baggage has been put on by the student loan debt, and it may actually have decreased. Certainly it's decreased per capita, but I don't have the data like on hand to back up like how much it's decreased.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it makes intuitive sense, right? So I wouldn't be surprised. But what we do have data on is that this influx of federal subsidies in the form of aid and loans also ignited an arms race among different institutions who embarked on these massive building programs and like adding amenities to try to attract more students and therefore more of that sweet federal money. And it's just a vicious cycle now.
Yeah. Plus, like and there's lots of costs that people focus on tuition, but there's actually lots of additional costs that go into it. So if your tuition was 20 grand a year, you would actually need a loan for like 50. And the reason is because you have to pay for room and board. And if you're living on campus, the room and board is also a fixed amount, and they're always going to peg their room and board to be essentially similar to living in an apartment off campus. And depending on the city that you're in, that's going to be quite high. Mandatory meal plans. I wrote an article recently about how students at Stanford were claiming to be followers of a somewhat obscure, by our standards, I guess, somewhat obscure Indian religion in order to get out of paying for the meal plan. They were required, if they were staying on campus, to pay for this meal plan. And the meal plan was a huge amount of money. It was like, I don't remember how much it was, but it was thousands of dollars. And they didn't want to pay for it because it was cheaper and better to just buy groceries than it was to eat at the school cafeteria. But then it was Jain and Jainism. So we have Jainist food now. So now you have to buy the meal plan. So there's lots of things like that. The parking fees go up. I remember the parking fees going up and up and up. I was like, why does it cost extra to park in the same parking lot we've always had? I guess you have to pay the police officers to write tickets.
Right.
But wait a minute, so the math didn't quite work out. So the parking fees go up. The fee for the dorm room goes up, and there's usually multiple levels of dorms. There'll be dorms that are more like apartment living, and then there's dorms that are like basically living in an army barracks, if you want to think of it like that. And then the meal plan, the student union fee. There's going to be a fee for student body. There are all kinds of extra fees, plus books. Books are another racket too that I think a lot of you guys already know about, the racket for books. Because I was in it, and because I'm also in the publishing industry like Brian, man, textbooks are a giant racket. Just a huge racket.
Yeah, have you seen the one that was caught with? So first of all, what the grift that textbook companies love is to force a new edition. Like, release a new edition of this chemistry book every year. What's different? Like 3 or 4 of the sidebars or photos. So now I have to throw out all the old editions and make students get all new ones and we're going to shrink wrap them with 3 other books you don't need and charge you $500 for the set, right? And recently, one updated edition of a college textbook was caught with an AI prompt in the sidebar.
Yeah. There you go. So thinking about textbooks. So how are textbooks a racket? I'll explain it to you. The problem with a book is that a book is a rather permanent thing. Books don't disappear. They remain around. Here's a book written by yours truly. Keys to Prolific Creativity. It will help give you lots of insight on how to design your creative process. For some reason, it's backwards. But anyway, here it is. And you can get it. It's part of the Patreon membership, or you can just buy it on Amazon. Right. This book doesn't go away. Right. The book doesn't go away. It hangs around. And because the book doesn't go away, you can buy used books. And when you're done with the course, do you want to keep the book? No, you want to sell the book. So the publishers are wise to this. And so what they do is they come out with new editions of the books. Now, can books be improved through new editions? They can, but are they? And the answer is almost never. And in fact, it's the opposite. Books get worse. As you mentioned, there was like an AI prompt in the sidebar. You also find that, and my wheelhouse is music. So the classic music theory textbook was by Bruce Binward. It was called Music in Theory and Practice. It was a big volume like this. That original first edition is one of the best music theory books ever written. Each subsequent edition gets worse. They start adding additional authors. I think Marilyn Socker got added as an author. They start chopping up the subjects of the book. They start removing content from the books, making it 2 volumes. So now you can't just buy the book. You got to buy volume 1 and volume 2. There was like 8, 9, we're on edition number 15. How much has music theory changed in the last 30 years? And the answer is it hasn't. It hasn't changed at all. There's no new information in there. But what they do is they do change the problems. So there's homework problems, and they just change those. So if the student wants to have a homework grade and the professor wants to assign homework, you have to have the new edition of the book. Even though it's much worse than the old edition, the information is not as presented as clear as it was in the first edition. They move information around to justify that. So it gets worse. You get a worse product, but you have to buy it because that's how publishers work. They won't ship used books to university bookstores. They only ship the new books, which means everyone's got to buy the new book. How much has calculus changed? Calculus hadn't changed at all. Calculus textbook from 1950 has all the same information, probably better information.
Yeah, exactly. And that is one piece of advice that I would advise recent high school grads looking to choose a major in college. Try to find a field with perennial knowledge like that doesn't change too much.
Yeah, and even if the knowledge is being updated, like people don't care if a medical textbook in like a highly specific field is updated. So, if it's something about like otolaryngology, like there'll be some new research that's done over the last 5-10 years that should be included in your book. That's important. But music theory, I mean, come on. This is why when I was a teacher, like for my guitar classes I ran, the textbook was the Christopher Parkening guitar method. Hasn't been updated in 50 years. It's the same as it always was. It's a good method. You can get a CD of all the little tracks and listen to them. Well, why? We don't need to upgrade it. And my composition teacher, he had a book by Reginald Smith Brindle, and that was the same thing. That book hadn't been updated since like 1970. Same information. You don't need an update on a book like that. So I really appreciated teachers that would do that weren't making you buy like the newest edition of whatever book. And when my wife taught college, they would send her all kinds of free textbooks, hoping that she would then assign those textbooks for her classes. It's a big racket. And that adds on. You have to take out the debt to buy the books. When I was a student, it was expected you would spend $300 a semester on books. By the time I was teaching, that number was up to like $600. Tuition had gone from about $1,000 a semester to over $2,000 just in like 4 years. And last time I checked, it was at like $5,000 or $6,000. So the tuitions have just exploded. The cost of books have exploded. Someone mentioned that it was $700 to park at their local university. When I was a student, it was $50.
Yeah. And it just goes to show that we're living under perverse economic incentives on a systematic level that, sorry, you ain't going to scrimp and save your way out of. That's not to say don't be frugal. Yes, you should set a budget. Yes, you have a responsibility to not be a spendthrift and waste your household's resources, especially if you're like the head of a household. But wheel clipping coupons and eating lunch meat every day alone dig you out of this hole? Almost certainly not.
Yeah.
Because it's everywhere and it's happening to everyone in every sector of society.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like, you should stop drinking Starbucks. And it's like, okay, if I drink Starbucks every day, which I don't, but it's like, if you drink it every day, I would save like a couple $100 a year. That's significant. Yeah, that'd be cool. Save some money by not going to Starbucks. However, will it be significant enough? You have to add up a lot of those thrifty things a lot of those have to be added up. Now, I encourage people to live in a thrifty way and to be, to pursue a lifestyle that's below their means, of course. But the idea that you can just, you'd be able to afford a house if you just saved more. If you just lived more like a monk, you'd be able to afford a house. And it's like, the math doesn't quite work there. There needs to be you should, be a bit more austere, but also things should cost less.
Well, and here is really the silver bullet, because if you look into it, guess which generation of all the currently living generations, sadly, greatest generation, I'm going to have to disqualify you here. Like all the generations like currently active in the economy, who saves the most? Who has the highest average savings right now?
I don't know.
Millennials.
Huh? Millennials.
Millennials by far. Their savings are about double those of Xers and Zoomers, and 4 times what Boomers have in average savings. So it ain't the avocado toast and the lattes.
Yeah. And that was the thing. Well, you'd be able to afford more if you didn't have your avocado toast. It's like, I don't eat avocado toast and I don't go to Starbucks. And now I do have things that I spend money on. I like my HEB brand soda, and I like, things like that. Now, I put a comment up. There's 2 comments. They're related. Comment 1. The story is even worse, unfortunately. Look up fractional reserve banking, and you will find out that the money that they loaned you was created out of nowhere. It's magic. Here's comment number 2. College debt is an awful scam, but the problem with any kind of debt forgiveness debt program is that it ends up being yet another wealth distribution program from men to women, which is antenatal. Actually, it would technically not, because the woman staying home with the child is a transfer of wealth from the man to the woman, right? But anyway, the reason I wanted to show these is that student loan debt, like many other kinds of debt, is a system where the money gets created basically by the Federal Reserve when the debt is created. And this is true of like home loans. A lot of people don't realize this, that your home loan basically is made by new money, because the bank takes out a loan from the Federal Reserve, cuts off a piece of that for their interest, and then gives you the loan. So they own money to the Federal Reserve, but they have an asset, which is the loan that they gave to you. And the difference between it is the interest that they collect to run their institution. So it's like, why not just get the loan from the Federal Reserve? We don't have time to get into all that, but that is a part of it. Now, student loan debt forgiveness. This is another objection that I always get is like, well, you're just going to take my money and give it to the people who owe money. Are you there?
I am there, yeah.
Okay, sorry. So yes. Do you have a response to that? You're just the taxpayers are going to have to pay for this.
Okay, yes, I do. And it's one argument that I present in the book, and that is, I agree with you. Or rather, okay, yes, let us grant that, because let's be honest. Loan forgiveness was recently tried under Biden, and as soon as Republicans got back in power, the first thing they did was smack it down. Now, whether you agree with that or not, and there are arguments to be made either way, I'm not coming down on any side of the fence there. What it proves is we do not have the political will in America right now to enact any kind of widespread loan forgiveness, not anything that would make a dent. So, okay, let's take debt forgiveness and cancellation off the table. We don't have to forgive all the loans. As I alluded to earlier, there are ways to solve the problem without a debt jubilee or any large-scale debt cancellation or forgiveness. One simple thing we can do that we alluded to earlier is just restore bankruptcy protections.
Yes. So this was my suggestion from years ago. Just make it like it was. It's automatic means testing. If you can't afford it, you can discharge it with bankruptcy. If you don't have the money, discharge it with bankruptcy. And if that hoses the lender, oh well, shouldn't have made the loan in the first place.
Yeah, someone earlier mentioned the bank bailout of 2008. Yeah, the government just is wringing its hands over $2 trillion in loans, really $1 trillion because the other half are paying them off. When they routinely waste vast sums, like when's the last time the Pentagon passed an audit? Like they've been caught making hundreds of billions disappear from their books for years, and no one bats an eye.
Yeah.
No one cares about it. So, yeah, and then bailing out the banks. Okay, that's fine. That's water under the bridge. But what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. If you're going to bail out trillion-dollar international mega corporations, you have a moral imperative to bail out the American people.
Yeah.
That you said you were doing this for before admitting, well, actually, no, we're just trying to extract money from student borrowers. So that is the real debt transfer from like 17-year-old kids who like can't even vote yet to the Department of Education.
Yeah. So here's another thing to look at that $2 trillion of student loan debt. Anybody that's watching is that's $2 trillion that people in the economy have to pay plus interest. So it's money that's getting pulled out of people's pockets no matter what. So it doesn't matter as much which side it comes out of. But I always make this point that's like canceling debt actually doesn't cost things because you're striking a line on a balance sheet. You're not having to increase taxes in order to pay off the loans because the government already holds the note. They can just forgive the loan.
Right, and that leads into what I was talking about earlier, right? That the whole source of that zombie meme that, oh, forgiving student loans would cost the taxpayers or taxpayers have to pay for student debt relief. Do you know where that entire line comes from? From the fact that Congress promised itself that they would make hundreds of billions in profit off of lending to students. And sorry if it didn't materialize, but you kind of made that up. That was kind of fake, guys. You counted your chickens before they were hatched. And now you're calling that they lost to the taxpayers. You shouldn't have gambled with the taxpayers' money. How about?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Because I didn't think about it from that angle, but mostly it's like, well, this is gonna come out of my pocket. Well, as Doom Turtle says, it's coming out. You have to deal with it no matter what. No matter what, like the bill is coming due.
You're gonna have to pay the piper. You can't ostrich your way out of this one. But luckily, there are things we can do which are pretty common sense. But it remains to be seen if we have the political will to do it. And what's even more insidious is, okay, let's say that Doom Turtle's doom, which he's pronounced, comes to the worst. Yeah, the system isn't sustainable. Eventually, the wheels are going to fall off. Let's say we let it get to that point. Will it look like a 2008 style crash? Probably not. Instead, it'll just accelerate enshittification. They will slightly turn up the heat on the boiling lobster. But it is going to make things worse, but so insidiously that one day you're going to wake up and look around and like, wow, things are way shittier. I wonder why. It'll be more like that, which sucks even more on many levels.
Yeah. And I feel like each subsequent generation also is getting saddled with more of it, right? It was a problem for our generation. I feel like it's a bigger problem for Zoomers because the trajectory hasn't stopped going up. Meanwhile, the access to economic benefits has also really plateaued. So it's probably a worse situation for Zoomers. And now I feel like when I'm looking at university degrees, it's like they replaced high school, which is kind of like a mandatory rite of passage. You get a high school degree in order to show that you are basically educated. Once they had destroyed the value of a high school diploma, you had to have a college diploma. So now instead of the government just paying for you to go to college for 4 years, instead you have to pay $100,000 to go to college for 4 years in order to have access to, say, the middle areas of the economy, not even the high areas, just the middle areas of the economy. You have to go get a college degree in order to have access to that. So over time, saddling that debt, it's basically just a giant tax. Now, it's not a tax that you're paying directly to the government, though you are paying it to the government, but it's just an extra tax for the younger generation and basically to benefit the older generations.
Yeah, it's Social Security and Medicare too. And great way to put it, David. The government's like pearl clutching over debt forgiveness boils down to, oh no, but the taxpayers will be on the hook for the cockamamie scheme, which failed to extract enough money from taxpayers.
Yeah. It's the same thing with Social Security, right? It's like our Social Security doesn't have enough money. It's like, so you didn't tax people enough. Yeah, what are we going to do about it? Well, okay, you shouldn't have done this to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. Student loans and Social Security are both upside down pyramid schemes.
Yeah,
that's really what they are. And yeah, they're both equally likely to collapse.
Yeah,
in our lifetime.
So this is a great comment too. Imagine the positive effects: more money back into the economy, more people could afford having children. So if you weren't servicing the debt, it's basically like a big tax cut. If you're not servicing the debt, then you have more money to do things with, which increases that velocity of money that everybody cares about. Everybody cares about economic stimulus. If you're a believer in that, then cutting taxes is the way that you're going to do it, and getting rid of or reducing debt, that will help cut the taxes. But I want to sideline this because as somebody who taught in the system, one of my big pieces of advice, even 20 years ago, to students was avoid debt as much as possible, because one of the things that you don't want in your early adulthood is to have a burden of debt that you have to service every month, because it changes everything about what you view possible in your life. If you wanted to go and pan for gold in Alaska, you can't do that, right? If you wanted to have some sort of adventurous period in your life, you can't do that if you're having to pay $500 to $1,000 a month every month servicing your student loan debt, unless you're willing to like default on the loan and suffer all of those other consequences, which maybe you are, but like most people don't want to do that. So they're like, well, I have to work a job. I have to make this much money no matter what. And it kind of goes down from there to where you can't take the risks that you want to take. Whereas I had no debt personally. And because I had no debt, I was able to take risks. I was able to move to Las Vegas. I was able to focus on being a performer and being poor for a while and building up my like ability to gig and the amount of performances I could do in a week. I was able to be poor temporarily in order to be wealthier later by taking risks. And when you have that debt, it's really hard to take those risks. So being able to avoid the debt as much as possible is one of the best gifts that you can give to your future self, because it just gives you more options.
Yeah, to expand on that, we all know that we've got a big demographic crisis, a childbearing crisis, a marriage crisis, right? All those institutions they're in collapse. Like, let's be honest, like only about 25% of millennials are getting married. It's crazy. The marriage rates go down by half for like every generation after the silence. And home ownership is in the tank, and it's in large part due to these student loans. Like these excessive debt burdens.
Yeah. Math. So this comment's great. Debt reduces your optionality. Now, this is a good one too from Sound Engraver. I see conservative personalities bash college forever, but when their kid gets accepted into one, it's a celebration. Yes, I noticed this. I noticed this as well. And I think it's because it's just a cultural rite of passage now. It's almost a default thing. And it's sort of like having a high school graduation announcement. You know, someone got into college and they're going to major in this or that. And shouldn't we celebrate them and clap for them? And depending on what kind of economic rung you're in, it's a bigger deal, what college you choose and that kind of stuff like that. But you're right. I see that all the time. And maybe it's because I taught in the system that I just can't take that kind of stuff personally seriously. And I know my kids go to college or whatever they choose to do, I probably wouldn't do that, like have that celebration. Rather, we save that celebration for when you finished or when there's some other significant accomplishment in your life. I'm personally more proud of the fact that I got one book published than I finished a college degree.
I'm proud of you too, because that's an accomplishment that only like 20% of the American public accomplishes in their lives.
Yeah, and it was an exercise of my will and discipline to a greater degree than like an automated go to class and take a test and here's your paper, you know. And now I'm still pretty proud of my college degree because I did more with it than other people did, but it was like there still was this extra level of like I made this thing exist. Like that pride of self-ownership in that I was able to do a thing. That really, that mattered a lot to me.
Yeah, well, actually, I soft sold it. It's 80% of Americans say they want to write a book, but only half of them ever start. Only half of those ever finish. Only half of those ever seek publication. And only half of those ever get it published. So whatever percent that is, it's way less than 20.
Yeah,
so good job.
Yeah, and I've said to people before, if you've ever had six-pack abs or you've written a book, you are ahead of almost everyone. Those things are really hard, and like you should be proud of doing that because most people can't handle that.
Well, and I've written this one for you and for everybody, like including those folks who are doing a bit of cogdis and smack talking the university system on one hand, and then celebrating when the kids get accepted to Case Western on the other or something, right? And what you got to understand there is the American public, since World War II, has been subject to historic levels of propaganda because the government, the financial system, and the education system want as many people shoved through this system as possible. But you're right. We really didn't have that attitude toward college until the GI Bill in the 40s.
Mm-hmm. Related comment here. I once again must plug the military lets you do all kinds of dumb things and still pay off debt. This was a rebuke that people had. Well, why don't you just join the military in order to pay for college? It's like, okay, that is an option, right? But when I think about what the purpose of military service is, as well as the purpose of college, is basically saying, why don't you do this thing? What the heck was that? Something fell over, or a cat's in here. Why didn't? Oh no, I had a poster fall down behind me. Whoops, whatever. Okay, why don't you? Why don't you? Do you want to join the military? No, but I'll do it to pay off my debt. Okay, so this is turning military service, which classically, like going back to Rome, was a privilege of the citizen to serve in the Roman military. You're taking it from something that's a patriotic service to the Republic and turning it into a job you do to pay for college so you can do something else.
Yeah.
I think that significantly lowers what we think about as military service, personally.
Yeah, now the commenter has a point. The GI Bill is an incredible deal. Just don't blow it all on a Camaro. But
yeah.
On the other hand, yeah, you're right. Historically, when a government switched from like a citizen militia or like having a warrior class who made up the armed forces to like a paid professional army, that's always historically been seen as a strong signal that the average person on the street doesn't see the nation as being worth fighting for anymore. So that is a so the GI Bill, good deal, very troubling sociological sign.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. Yeah, it's a good point. And this, we can see this with the history of Rome, especially, is that over time, the military largely became populated by foreigners, by barbarians, by barbarian mercenaries. And that ultimately led to the fall of the western half of the empire to Odoacer, is that Odoacer was a German, right? He wasn't even Roman, but he had this Roman army. And then when things got bad, he decided to go in and conquer Italy. So that's always been a big precursor. And that's also the precursor to the, the Roman civil wars with, Marius all the way into Caesar, ending with Augustus, and Augustus kind of forming the loyalty of the military around himself as a way to stabilize the situation.
Yeah,
You
Rome
don't
is
have,
the classic example. Totally.
yeah. I looked at KNF's. It's a big deal getting into college. My dad really pushed for it. I gave up after 3 semesters and joined the military. Got a lot more out of doing that.
Yeah, I bet you're better off.
So another great one from Hardwick. In your view, with the Rocketeer there, that's a great movie. I need to go back and watch that one
Ooh,
again.
yeah.
In your view, does the commandment in Deuteronomy 23:19-20, which forbids all lending and interest except to a foreigner, still apply today? So we can go back to Aquinas. That's what he cites for why you can't engage in usury. And the reason he says you can't, not just you can't lend it to a foreigner, but you can't lend it to anyone because all people should be part of the nation of God. So really, you shouldn't lend money at interest to anyone, right? We should all be neighbors. So that was Aquinas had a hard line with it. But if we're going by the technicalities of what that lending money at interest is, we're talking about the use of money. So I would go back to that. I agree with it, right? But I agree with it with the Catholic definition of the sin of usury in that context, in the church's context. Is that okay? Does that make sense? I don't know if Brian has anything to add to that.
Just a little, which is that, okay, yeah, I'm a Catholic theologian. The Catholic teaching is not that the Old Testament is irrelevant or erroneous, like that's more of a Marcionite heresy, but rather that the New Testament is concealed in the Old and the Old Testament is revealed in the New, right? Like our Lord said, I came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, right? Not one like iota will pass away. But the context that you provided, David, is important because what the new covenant did was expand membership in God's covenant to the widest reach possible, universally, right? That's why we call ourselves a Catholic, the universal church. Whereas God started making covenants with, right, like one person, one individual, and then he went to a family, and then he went to a tribe, and then to a nation, and now it's worldwide. So the old law has to be seen in light of that context in terms of the analogy of faith. It's called the content and unity of Scripture. Also, there are laws listed in the Old Testament which were intended from the beginning to be temporary or situational or conditional, like polyester fabrics and avoiding shellfish, for example. Those are disciplinary laws. So, hence why the church, and even Aquinas, said that, well, it's not all lending and interest. It's lending and interest on like a mutuum or a consumption loan that is usurious.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand that, and I would agree with that. So that's kind of the point I was trying to get at. Is like I agree with that in the context of how the church teaches that meaning.
Yeah, and why the foreigner's exemption has expired because I believe this is Timothy. It gets warped a lot, but there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, man or woman in Christ Jesus. Right? That's the part everybody leaves out in the mystical body of Christ. So that's why you're not allowed to treat foreigners as like I gotta be careful about but like acknowledge their inherent dignity, right? It doesn't mean you have to give away the farm.
Yeah. And there's a lot of protections for quote sojourners in the Old Testament, which would mean foreigners that were living, amongst the people of Israel. They received certain protections as well. So they weren't acknowledged. They were acknowledged as people. And they weren't like non-people in the Old Testament either. And there's also debt jubilees in the Old Testament and things like that people often don't like to think about because it makes you uncomfortable that like there should be widespread forgiveness of debt every so often. I love the thinking about the Old Testament laws and things like that because they do shine lights on some of the things that we find uncomfortable. And after reading Aquinas, going back and looking at a lot of those justifications, I think was certainly enlightening for me to think about. And that's what he leads with that, by the way. It's like, the Bible says not to do this.
Yeah,
maybe that's all you need.
Professor of Sacred Scripture was his job title. I mean, that's what he spent most of his time doing, was meditating on the Bible. So, yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations on writing a book, Adrian. I'm proud of you.
Me too.
Finished the first draft. You're ahead of the game. You know, my recommendation for people who've written their first draft of a book is to not worry about trying to rewrite or edit that first manuscript, but rather to start working on a second manuscript to help build up some of your skills. And once you build up the skills, then you have a better approach to your first book. You'll be able to look at it with fresher eyes and just better, more highly skilled eyes, so that you can make better decisions even before you would hand it off to an editor. Brian's an editor, right? So if you need editing services, Brian is an editor. So that's my usual advice for people that are like new to this and they've done a manuscript and like, I wrote a first draft, I'm ready to edit. It's like, let's put the brakes on that. Why don't you try working on a second book and just build up your skills and your confidence in being able to complete your project. And then when you go back to that first book, you'll have much better eyes. Sometimes it can be like, I remember looking back at the first book I ever wrote, and it was like, it's kind of an ego crushing thing where like, man, I was bad. I didn't know what I was doing, but that's good because then, you know, oh, okay. I know how I could make this good when I rewrite it or when I do a new draft of it. And when you're brand new, you're just not going to have the perspective to be able to do that. So that's my advice.
Yeah. Important advice. Yeah. Let the pie cool on the windowsill for a bit before you start cutting in on it. And yeah, shout out to Gen Z Vol, who is also an honored peer of the Court of Kairos. That is the online authors fellowship, whose humble servant I am. So if you're interested in getting hands-on advice from a community of experienced online authors, artists, editors, and even literary critics, stop on my Patreon. We would be glad to welcome you. The Gen Z Vol is coming along. I've watched him coming along. I've been watching your progress, man. You're making us all proud. So you should be. Give yourself a pat on the back right now.
Yeah. Awesome. Writing and publishing on Royal Road. I think that's a good avenue for new authors that are looking to, it's an easy way. Now, what's great about serial publication, I know we're straying kind of far off the topic and we're really close to being out of time, but it's cool. It's cool to talk about it, right? Like if you're publishing serially, it gets you into a groove where you feel like I got to do the work every day. There's people, maybe there's just two people reading it. There's two people who want to read the next part of my story. I got to get it on there. You know, it really does help with a lot of motivation, and that daily motivation is what helps you achieve that final product that you're imagining. It's about lots of little steps, kind of like not eating your avocado toast.
Well, speaking of which, do you mind if I field this latest comment up here right now?
This one?
Yeah, from Liberal Audis 222 to...
I missed it.
Oh, I'm watching the live YouTube feed, so I think I'm slightly out of...
Okay, yeah, I see.
Out of step. So the not Cogdis one.
Oh, yeah, this is...
He's been coming up with some good, rigorous, well-argued points.
Yeah, this is a really good point, right? Is that it can be full of stupid and evil people and still be a gatekeeper. And that's one of the problems that I think we'll run into in the future. And it's not one that I have an answer for, like how to overcome right now. I don't know if Brian has any more info.
Yes, I do. Here's the problem. Yes, that was largely the case. Where the Cogdis comes in is... it ain't 1960 anymore. It ain't 1970. It's not even 2020. Recently, a large-scale surveys of employers, right, like we're talking Fortune 500 companies, found that 90% of them, of their HR and hiring managers, said that a college degree is no longer a help to getting hired. 40% of them said the candidates with college degrees were less likely to be considered now.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's that degree inflation that David was talking about. The chickens have come home to roost now on that, and employers are realizing that, because, okay, let's be honest, the whole reason that employers started accepting a college degree as a credential was because it was a stand-in for an IQ test. That's all it was.
Yeah. There was a Supreme Court ruling that said you couldn't Like you couldn't use an IQ test because of disparate impact. It
Yeah,
was
because
below the
employers.
standard.
Yeah, because employers, what they want isn't someone who got a certain grade on a test. Okay, they want someone with the knowledge and mental acuity that grade used to be a reliable stand-in for, and now it's not, because now, because of the everybody has to go to college meme, everybody does, because of student loans and perverse incentives, universities are ratcheting up the propaganda and the advertising to attract as many students as possible, who are now like having to take remedial English their freshman year. Okay, stuff they should have mastered in 8th grade, let alone senior year of high school. So the word is out. Employers realize that a sheepskin doesn't mean anything anymore, or at least doesn't mean what it used to. So, yeah, colleges are going to find soon that their role as gatekeepers is, I mean, they might be standing there guarding the gate, but the wall has long since collapsed.
Yeah, there's a lot of holes in that wall.
So that's the other problem. I mean, college used to be something that smart people did. Now it's something everyone is convinced will make you smart.
Yeah. Yeah, it's thinking. What's the analogy? Wet streets cause rain.
Yeah, or if I join the NBA, I will like grow 5 inches, because the average NBA player is like 6.
Yeah,
whatever, right?
if I want to be 6'6", I just have to figure out how to get into the NBA.
Yeah.
So yeah, like there's, I don't want to like say, oh, nobody needs a college degree, like, because there's certifications versus just degrees that aren't necessary, so if obviously you need a medical degree if you want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying anything about that. I will say my friends that were doctors, a whole bunch of them went to medical school outside of the United States, even though they're Americans, because it was so expensive. They went to like a medical school in the Bahamas or something. I knew someone that went to medical school in Jamaica.
That's eye-opening. And I do touch on that in Debt Reckoning, because it's not just a doom and gloom, like, oh, we're screwed. And like, too many books and commentators just obsess over minutely describing the problem and never get around to solutions or actionable advice.
Mm-hmm.
I do that. Don't get me wrong. But then Debt Reckoning also says, hey, are you thinking of going to college, or do you have a kid who's thinking of going to college? Which degrees are still worth it? I inform you. Like, and yeah, doctor is one of them. Like, here are the degrees that if you're going to college and get these, it probably is worth it. And in fact, it's really only worth going to college if you go for these degrees. There's only like 5 of them.
Yeah.
Because one thing that's happened is a bunch of them did computer science, which I don't know about you, but I grew up being told, well, you got to get your Cisco cert, man. You got to learn to code. You got to get a networking degree. And now those guys are on the breadline.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to anticipate exactly what's going to happen. And we've seen that with, with college computer science degrees and things like that. An interesting point, and we really need to draw it to a close because I need to go here in a few minutes. But one of the things that I realized when I was a student, and I've shared some of these anecdotes, is that my professors didn't know as much about things as I thought they knew when I was 18. And as I became more educated, I realized there were more and more holes in the knowledge base of some of my professors. So I had this anecdote where I had an English professor who didn't realize the importance of being earnest was a play on words. That is to say, she didn't realize earnest was a word, that earnest had a meaning besides the name Ernest. And so all of us, we're all graduate students, we're like, how do you not get this play on words? This is what makes the title funny. They're both pretending to be this third person named Ernest. But they're not acting with earnest intentions. So that was funny to us, but it made me realize, like, okay, I probably learned more about this play by reading it and talking about it with other people who read it than I did from taking a course on it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at, where like the erudite gentleman is a guy who reads a lot of stuff and talks about it on the internet, maybe more so than the guy who takes a lot of college courses from professors who, when you're 18, you're just kind of relying on the university to have filtered them so that they have a good person there for you. The older I got, the more I realized that filter breaks down for all kinds of reasons. It's not something you can rely on a whole lot. You rely on it a little bit, but
yeah, honestly, at this point, I really am comfortable in saying, like, hey guys, is there a field you want to master or a skill you want to learn? Like, you want to know how to code a simple web page, or do you want to become well versed in Shakespeare? Do you want to learn how to compose music? Well, guess what? Skip college, Dr. Google, Lecturer Claude, and Professor YouTube are there basically for free.
And that's how my channel started, guys. It started with free guitar lessons. That's what it started with. And the reason is because I saw this problem now more than 10 years ago, was like, people are paying a lot of money for guitar lessons. There wasn't a lot of guitar instruction on YouTube at the time. You know, people are paying a lot of money for guitar lessons, and they just don't need to. Like, the basic stuff is really accessible through stuff like YouTube.
I learned to create my covers from you.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I was able to study book covers, and I was able to study design through YouTube and through a lot of free articles that people would publish, just kind of sharing their knowledge. There's a whole ecosystem of auto repair tutorials on YouTube that are, like, think about that economic benefit to mankind of, like, here's the knowledge for how to fix this thing on your car, so you don't have to pay a mechanic $800 to fix a $20 part. Like, wow, you know, that's huge for people who are especially don't have a lot of cash, you know?
Yeah.
But
yeah, and it works. By the way, folks, David knows his stuff, because that cover I designed with his tutelage became a #1 Amazon category bestseller. So, yeah, listen to him, all his teachings.
Okay. I think we're about out of time, Brian. Let's finish up with whatever other pitch you have for this book. I have the I've been showing the Kickstarter page this whole time. Cool. So we've been able to, hopefully anyone who felt like looking at something, they could have read the pitch. So the pitch has already been there, but you tell me more about the pitch of this book. You mentioned some of the solutions for individuals, as well as an explanation of what we're dealing with here.
Yeah. Do you want to know what we're dealing with? Do you want to know how we got here? Have you wondered, what can I do about it? And more broadly, well, what can we as citizens do about it? All those answers and more in Debt Reckoning. I need your help to make it real, to get this information out to people who are lost in the wilderness, like sheep without a shepherd. The answers are out there. I put this volume together for you. Right now, we are running a Memorial Day weekend special. There are, last I checked, 7 left available. And either way, whether they're claimed or not, the special ends Monday at 11:59 p.m. Central. Okay, so you have this holiday weekend to get some holiday reading, which would be delivered by the 4th of July, and support a worthy cause, and get some information that can save you and your loved ones tens if not hundreds of thousands. So get in there, smash the link in the show notes, back Debt Reckoning now, get Kickstarter exclusive rewards before the Amazon launch. Okay, this is primo exclusive stuff just for you. So go back it now.
All right, there's a link. I'm going to link all of my stuff real quick. So if you want to support the musical endeavors, I should have some solo guitar stuff as soon as I have the ability to record it, which is going to be pretty fun. I think people will like it. I played a little tidbit of what's going on in the last video, so you'll be able to see some of that. I will have a new story up on Patreon, hopefully this weekend. We'll see how efficient I am at getting that out, but it'll be soon. And then I have another one coming down the pipe, another science fiction story. So a couple science fiction stories coming up free for, or I should say, as part of the Patreon membership. Whenever I say free, somebody busts me on that. So yeah, it's part of the Patreon membership. And yeah.
Yeah, still, guys, check out David's All Music channel. I have been. It is sweet. And do you mind if I mention one more thing I almost forgot?
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay. So I've seen a lot of you guys in chat sharing your own personal victories, failings, horror stories, anecdotes. Well, guess what? I have offered a limited time chance for you to get your story in the book. I'm offering 10. We're down to 9 now. One's been claimed. Chances for you to tell me your personal experience with student debt or the student debt experience of a friend or loved one, which will get in print and be seen by countless people. Okay? So if you want a literary rage room to rail against the machine, or do you have a counterpoint, grab the Be Featured in the Book reward, and we will make it happen.
All right. I like that. That's what a cool offer there. What a cool idea.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm not just pontificating. I want to hear from you. I want to open the stage to the people. So we're doing just that.
All right. I think that's about it. Thank you all for joining me. Brian, thanks for joining me. And you can back his project. Link is down in the description as well as in the chat. So check that out. And I think you're already halfway to your goal on day 1, which is great.
Thank you.
It is day 1, right?
Yeah, this was launch day.
Great. Okay.
I wouldn't be anywhere else than here on launch day. Thank you.
All right. So take it easy, folks, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great day.